I no get any quarrel with the palace of Oba of Benin over artifact matter. EMOWAA phase 1 dey Gidigba. Godwin Obaseki na him talk this one. Governor of Edo State Godwin Obaseki don talk say him government no get any wahala with the palace of Oba of Benin, His Royal Majesty Omonoba Nedu Ukwa Akpolokpolo Oba Ewaye II sake of the return of the artifact when tiffy British people carry comot for Benin for 1897. He talk this one when he do talk with government people and important stakeholders to unveil the first phase of Edo Museum for West African Art when people sabi as EMOWAA on Thursday for Benin City. Governor Obaseki went chook mouth for how the project is start. Talk say this EMOWAA project go put Edo State for the world map for tourism matter.
Many of you in this room, I believe, are engaging this project in this detail for the first time. So it's important for us to situate this project within the context before we drill down the technical details. I'm sure many of you are asking, why this project? Why is it important? You recall, since we got into office, the focus has been, what do we do to make Edo State globally and nationally competitive? Why Edo? Why should people come here? Why should they come and do business here? What makes us different? Everybody in the world today is doing the same thing. They're planning their cities, they're building infrastructure, they're, when you see a presentation being made in Kigali or in Doha, it's the same issues people are raising. But there are very few places in the world that have something extra, something special, and something distinct. So when you look at Africa today, you're saying, okay, let's look back 500, 700 years ago. Who has something from that era that can show the world today? Because this is very, very rare. So in Africa, you can count no more than 3 or 4 places. The ruins, the Zimbabwean ruins, the, the pyramids in Egypt, and what else? Benin. But over the last 40, 50 years, somehow it's not an area we have focused on. Principally because the invasion of 1897 shocked our system, and it's taken us almost 100 years to recover from that shock. Because just imagine a civilization that was intact for more than 7 centuries, and suddenly it got shocked. And so the people have been in transition for the better part of this century. And it didn't help with oil boom because, it just gave us an escape. And to escape from who we are, not knowing who we are, I started procuring, just purchasing everything to make up for that deficit. So that's what we found when we came into government. To say, so as a people, as a democratically elected government, we owe our people and posterity that responsibility to first explain who we are and be proud of who we are and what we have, and to show what we have to the rest of the world. And tidy up our systems and and infrastructure in place so that the world can come and see what we have. Because we found a disconnect. Because when you talk about the Benin Empire, you look at these artifacts in museums all over Europe, and you don't come back to where these things are supposed to have been created. There's a huge disconnect. I had an uncle, he's late now, he lived in Germany for 50 years, had a lot of relationships. And towards the end of his life, he used to come home regularly. And he'll come with his German friends. And they come in to Benin, he had a foundation, do a few charitable things. And there's always a shock with the friends when they come and say, is this Benin? And he says, no, there was a special, he jokingly says, look, the United Nations actually promulgated an order that you should not touch anything in this city, you should preserve it. That's why it's like this. Do you get it? This is an ancient city. And that was just the escape. But coming in to government, we just felt, look, you know what? It's our responsibility to do it. And we found a window with the conversations globally about restoration and restitution of stolen artworks. And it's not an accident, because the first year we got into office, working with the Smithsonian, we found a photographic collection of photographs taken in this city 60, 70 years ago by a renowned photographer, a long-headed photographer, sitting in the Smithsonian. We got into working with them into a relationship, refurbished the National Museum here, and brought those collections for viewing locally. And you could see the interest it aroused. Part of the challenge here is that, and then over the time, you may not have realized it, many of us started going out, studying abroad, not coming back, and that whole culture of traveling started, which now degenerated into human trafficking. Nobody wants to come back because you just felt home was not good enough. So for us, it was important to begin to do things. First, to identify this unique opportunity we have, to extol it, polish it, and then begin to exhibit it to the world so that the world can come and see.
Obaseki talk say this project will not be only museum, go generate ogbonge revenue, bring tourists, and come help us discover ourselves as people. A council talk say them go complete the first phase of this project before them come up for office for 2024.
In Benin, we agreed that we're going to build a museum. We're going to build a facility to host and hold some of these works. But more importantly, even beyond the works that are coming from abroad, do you realize that we have more than 300 pieces of our works in the National Museum in Onikon in Lagos? They're in the dungeon. They're deteriorating. Everybody is talking about what's coming from out. There are still quite a lot here that we need to preserve. And that just told us that, if you really think about it in Nigeria today, you don't have any of this such facility. So why can't we use this as an opportunity, now that we have interest from abroad, to build the infrastructure we require to host works of art? Because if you look at the whole sub-region, from Dakar to Yaoundé, this is where the core of West African civilization is. So it's no longer just about Benin City, because the empire spread across the sub-region. So if the Egyptians are using what they have to represent the arts of Northern Africa, then we should have something to represent the arts of West Africa. We need to use that God-given opportunity in our DNA to recreate a new generation of people who can conquer the world the way our forebears conquered the world and expressed to the world artistry. That's why it's important to have this infrastructure located here. Why it's important to have this infrastructure available to a whole new generation of Edo people. And so, as we walk through this workshop today, you have to understand that this is perhaps the biggest thing we can ever have. Because it's like going to be the magnet to make people come here. And when they come, they will want to see other things we have. They will want to enjoy the hospitality. They'll want to enjoy the food. They'll want to enjoy your music. They then want to do business. So it's just not another museum. It's not a fight about collecting some pieces. No, it's beyond that. It's a project that represents the essence of who we are as a people and how to use this unique advantage to now be globally relevant and competitive. You're not just going to be building a museum. Build a cultural district. So that when people come, yes, they'll see a few things in the museum, but don't forget that you have the moat system in this city. That's the largest man-made earthenware in the world in history. People want to see it. In what state is this infrastructure or this monument, the moats? We should see how we can link that into this whole idea of preserving the culture of the place. You still have some of the guilds. Why can't we link this idea of culture to the guilds, the bronze casting guilds, the wood casting guilds, and all the other guilds around. So that when people come to Benin, they actually have a true cultural experience. So, as the chairman of the EMOWAA Trust was saying in his presentation, we already have interest. People are excited. They want to support what we're doing. But it can't be driven from outside all the time. What's our own contribution? What's our own relationship to this project? Who should own it? Us or people from the outside? We should co-own it. At least from a government standpoint. Let us understand what we're doing and see how they relate to this project. So when we go to GIs and say we want these maps, they must understand that, okay, this is why we need these maps and this is what we need to do. And they can now say, you know what, by the way, we have some maps in our archives that were hand-drawn in 1914. We can give them to you. These are part of the things you can put in your museum for exhibition. 100-year-old maps of this city. You go across to the local government, they can tell you, wow, wait a minute, maybe we can find something about the designs, how the contract that was given to build Urupota Hall in 1809. Why not? These things are severe. So each and every one of you here from your MDA has a responsibility to make sure that at least we get the first phase going. And then let those who come after build on what we have started. If we have 1 million people coming into the city or to the state to just look at culture, do things every year, and each one spends $1,000, can you imagine the amount of money that will come in? Not from crude oil, not from FAC. So I think it's another way to look at how, our development trajectory. And please, I'm encouraging all of you, whatever issues, whatever questions, just ask so that, and whatever support we can now lend to the team, let's do. Because we must start the work this year, and by the time we're leaving in 2024, we should have at least the first phase completed and work will have started.
Philippe Nacho be chairman for EMOWAA Trust can't give the people ogbonge information about the project.
There are some important things to point out here. Number one is, this is not just about Benin and Edo State. This is about West Africa, West African culture. The second thing to point out here is, this is as much about creating opportunities for contemporary living artists, living artisans, as it is respecting the past. There's no point bringing objects for people to look at if it doesn't generate jobs, doesn't generate employment. So one of the things that at the heart of this project is to try to use the culture of Benin as a way of establishing Benin as a center for creative arts and creative industries. The first phase of the project will be focused on two objectives. One is what we're calling the creative district, which is developing a neighborhood and a relevance to creative professionals. So EMOWAA is already starting to work with local artists, artisans, educational institutions to support the development of the creative district, which is intended as an ecosystem for creative industries in the historic part of Benin City that is within the vicinity of where the new museum will be. So in a sense, what we're trying to do is, before we build the building, the main museum itself, is to work on the neighborhood around the museum. So when the museum comes, it's relevant and it's understood by the neighborhood that we're trying to serve. The second thing is to put in place what we would regard as the engine room of the museum. And that's the building that we've called the pavilion. So it's to develop core research and archival or storage facilities. The EMOWAA Pavilion will be a world-class storage and archival facility. It will contain a materials research laboratory that is able to, for example, date objects. So if there's an ancient object, you don't know what the date is, we'll have very sophisticated equipment that allows us to date those objects. It will contain equipment that can do 3D scanning of objects so that we can digitally record objects, whether they're documents, whether they're manuscripts, whether they're physical objects. And if there was damage to that object, it will allow us to recreate that same object in a manner that is that you would not be able to detect the difference between the original object and the recreated object with the naked eye. So the idea is really a world-class storage facility. And this is aimed not at being just something for the Edo Museum of West African Art. This facility is aimed to support museums throughout West Africa. It will be the best storage and archives facility in West Africa. And what we're looking to do is to build relationships not only with the NCMM museums in Nigeria, but museums throughout West Africa who need research and storage capability. There are some partnerships we've already formed. Edo State being number one. NCMM, the National Commission on Museums and Monuments, which is federal government, number two. The German Archaeological Institute, who is already partnered with us on archaeological work, already providing some funding to us. The Leventis Foundation, most of you know Leventis, they have significant investment already in Edo State and have also been in Nigeria for a long time. They have a foundation that actually is one of the largest supporters of arts and culture globally. So they give more than £1 million a year to the British Museum. So we made contact with that foundation, and they are supporting the Pavilion project and the museum as a whole. We have established a relationship with Oxford University. They are going to help with finding people and training for the materials lab that exists within the Pavilion. We have established a relationship with the British Museum. There's a type of archaeology which is really focused on preserving and making sure that you don't disturb what is there already. So there's some work we have done already in that regard. Digital Benin, some of you will know already, it's an initiative mainly spearheaded by Hamburg University in Germany. We're working with them. And then EMOWAA, which is Open Society. It's George Soros's foundation. We're also working with them. They're providing funding for us. And this is really just the beginning. The structure we have set up, and I don't have a slide on this, but I'll just explain. The concept with the museum and the creative district and the pavilion is that the funds that are raised will be raised into a foundation, a charitable foundation, a Nigerian registered charitable foundation. And that foundation will own and run the museum and the museum facilities. That foundation, Edo State has representation on the board. The National Commission of Museums and Monuments have representation on the board. And then there is a set of independent directors who have served terms and rotate out, and who are personally liable for making sure that whatever funding is received is applied directly to the projects it's supposed to be applied to. So this is the idea, to make this a self-standing, perpetual organization.
Omo Aluke Ajakaye, TMC TV News.